get, the more forgetful I get. It might be my age. It might also be the enormous quantity of information and change that's thrown at me each and every day. What I hope, though, is regardless of how many years I am blessed to live on this earth, I hope I never forget what it was like to be a child. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus shares, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Although it has been celebrated since 1992, this is our first year that we as a church community are participating in Children's Sabbath. Although these are very important things, Children's Sabbath is not a time for adults to become more childlike, nor is Children's Sabbath a time for celebrating the talents of our children. According to the Children's Defense Fund, who created Children's Sabbath, it's a time for places of worship across the nation to unite in shared concern and action for our children. Children's Sabbath is more than a worship service. It's a movement to listen to the needs of our children and then to act. To act in ways that create the beloved community, a place where every child feels loved, valued, seen, protected, and has a sense of belonging. It is Isaiah's peaceable kingdom, a community in which the wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion will feed together, and a little child shall lead them. Children's Sabbath is an intentional time to think about the needs of our children, to really pay attention to them, and then to advocate for them. To advocate for the resources that help keep them healthy, the resources that help keep them safe, the resources that allow them to learn and grow and thrive. For years, I have had this little magazine snippet on my desk. And as is often the way with God's still speaking voice, I happened to look down at it as I was creating this worship series. And the snippet is from a 2011 article written by Fareed Zakaria. And it's called, "Are America's Best Days Behind Us?" Pay attention, it was written in 2011. It's not that our democracy doesn't work. It's that it works only too well. American politics is now hyper-responsive to constituents' interests. And all those interests are dedicated to preserving the past rather than investing for the future. There are no lobbying groups for the next generation of industries, only for those companies that are here and now with cash to spend. There are no special interest groups for our children's economic well-being, only for people who get government benefits right now. The whole system is geared to preserve current subsidies, tax breaks, and loopholes. That is why the federal government spends $4 on elderly people for every dollar it spends on those under 18. And when the time comes to make cuts, guess whose programs are first on the chopping board? That is a terrible sign of the society's priorities and outlooks. These words, written almost 15 years ago, unfortunately continue to be true. You just have to look at our own city of Bristol. Fareed Zakaria's article, though, isn't about advocating for children. It's about making America great. And he argues that America is great because of the choices we made decades ago. The United States continues to be the world's largest economy because in the 1950s and 60s, our country invested in interstate highway system, massive funding for science and technology, and a public education system that was the envy of the world. The United States continues to be the world's largest economy because 60 years ago, we invested in education and children. In the 1950s and 60s, our own church community invested a lot in children. We had a dedicated, ordained clergy who administrated and led church school and youth group, as well as a choir director for just the youth choir and the high school choir. We also had a play group that grew into an outstanding community-wide preschool. As a church community, we invested a lot of resources into ministries for children and youth in order to create God's beloved community, a community in which all have what they need to grow, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. At today's congregational meeting, we will be dreaming, visioning for our church's future. And to do that, you always need to look at the money. You need to look at where we currently invest our resources so you can discern if we are spending our money on what is important, on what creates Christ's community for all. Now, if you looked quickly at our church's ministry budget, you would see $950 budgeted for children and youth ministries, which is 0.25%. So 0.25% of our annual expenses. Now, we invest a lot more than that in the spiritual nurture of our children and youth. There's this building, which provides space for kids club, youth choir, confirmation, youth group, as well as Cub Scouts and Scouts to gather. There is my time and Bill's time, as well as office supplies and equipment to support youth and children's activities. Is it enough, though? Should we as a church be investing more in our children's Christian faith journeys? Should we as a community be investing more in our children's health, education, and safety? 2 years ago, I added youth group to my very full ministry schedule because I remember how important youth group was to me as a child. It was in youth group that I found a place to belong. It was in youth group that I first heard my calling to ordained ministry. I remember and am so very thankful for the tremendous resources my home church invested in children and youth ministries. What do you remember about your childhood? Do you remember the adults who volunteered with you, even though their children were grown? Do you remember the adults who made sure you had safe and well-maintained parks to play in? Do you remember the adults who spoke up at church, city, and state meetings to advocate for education, public school education, and Christian education? Do you remember the adults who took the time to listen to you, nurture you, advocate for you, and make sure you knew you were important? Children's Sabbath is about remembering all of those adults, and then remembering that we are now those adults. We are the ones called to advocate for our children, caring for our earth and their future, providing enough resources to nurture their talents and imaginations, creating a beloved community where every child feels loved, valued, seen, and protected. God's beloved community where all know they are safe and belong. We are the ones God is calling to right side up the world for children. We are the ones God is calling to listen